Okay, so we're at the top of chapter 8, page 48. Okay, here we go. Chapter 8, Snozzcumbers. But if you don't eat people like the others, Sophie said, then what do you live on? That is a squelching tricky problem out here, the BFG answered. In this slosh-flunking giant country, happy eats like pineapples and pigwinkles is simply not growing. Nothing is growing except for one extremely icky-poo vegetable. It's called the snozzcumber. The snozzcumber? Cried Sophie. There's no such thing. The BFG looked at Sophie and smiled, showing about 20 of his square white teeth. Yesterday, he said, we was not believing in giants, was we? Today we is not believing in snozzcumbers. Just because we happen to not have actually seen something with our own two little winkles, we think it is not existing. So he's trying to teach her a lesson that, sometimes, we don't always believe in everything that we see, and that just because something, you can't see something doesn't mean that it's not true. That it could be true whether you can actually see it or not. What about, for instance, the great squizzly Scotch hopper? I beg your pardon, Sophie said. And the humble crimp? What's that? Sophie said. And the rap rascal? The what? Sophie said. And the crumpscoodle? Are they animals? Sophie asked. They is common animals, said the BFG continuously. I is not a very know-it-all giant myself, but it seems to me that you is absolutely know-nothing human being. Your brain is full of rotten wool. You mean cotton wool, Sophie said. What I mean and what I say are two different things, the BFG announced rather grandly. I will now show you a snozzcumber. I love this part. Snozzcumbers are very interesting vegetables. The BFG flung open a massive cupboard and took out the weirdest looking thing Sophie had ever seen. It was about half as long as an ordinary man, but it was much thicker. It was as thick around its girth as a perambulator. It was black with all white stripes along its length, and it was covered all over in coarse knobbles. So you can kind of see what it looks like in that picture on page 49. Here is the repulsant snozzcumber, cried the BFG, waving it about. I swoggle it, I mispise it, I desponge it. But because I is refusing to gobble up human beings like the other giants, I must spend my life guzzling up icky poo snozzcumbers instead. If I don't, I will be nothing but skin and groans. You mean skin and bones, Sophie said. I know it is bones, the BFG said, but please understand that I cannot be helping it if I is sometimes saying things a little squiggly. I is trying to make my very best all the time. The big friendly giant looked suddenly so forlorn that Sophie got quite upset. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to be rude. So because the BFG doesn't like to eat human beings, he has to eat these snozzcumbers, and they're just so yucky and filthsome. The word repulsant means like that they're just disgusting and the worst possible thing you could ever imagine. And she's kind of like, she feels bad for, correcting him all the time because he does, mix up his words. There never was any schools to teach me talking in giant country, the BFG said sadly. But couldn't your mother have taught you? Sophie said. My mother? Cried the BFG. Giants don't have mothers. Surely you is knowing that. I did not know that, Sophie said. Who ever heard of a woman giant? Shouted the BFG, waving the snozzcumber around his head like a lasso. There never was a woman giant, and there never will be one. Giants is always men. Sophie felt herself getting a little muddled. In that case, she said, how are you born? Giants isn't born, the BFG answered. Giants appears, and that's all there is to it. They simply appears the same way as the sun and the stars. And when did you appear? Sophie asked. Now how on earth could I be knowing a thing like that? The BFG said. It was so long ago I couldn't count. You mean you don't even know how old you are? No giant is knowing that, the BFG said. All I has known about myself is that I is very old, very, very old and crumply. Perhaps as old as the earth. That's pretty old, right? Giants is never dying, the BFG answered. Sometimes, and quite suddenly, a giant is disappearing and nobody is ever knowing where he goes to. But most of us giants is simply going on and on like wispy time swindlers. So he's saying that they actually never die. They just kind of disappear, but nobody knows what happens to them or where they go. The BFG was still holding the awesome snozcumber in his right hand, and now he put one end into his mouth and bit off a huge chunk of it. He started crunching it up, and the noise he made was like the crunching of lumps on ice. "Oh, it's filthing," he sputtered, speaking with his mouth full and spraying large pieces of snozcumber like bullets into Sophie's direction. Sophie hopped around on the tabletop, ducking out of the way. "It's disgustrous," the BFG gurgled. "It's sickable, it's rotsome, it's maggot-wise. Try it for yourself, this foulsome snozcumber." "No, thank you," Sophie said, backing away. "It's all you're going to be guzzling around here from now on, so you might as well get used to it," said the BFG. "Go on, you snippy little winkle, go have a go." Sophie took a small nibble. She spluttered. "Oh no, oh gosh, oh help." She spat it out quickly. "It tastes of frog skin," she gasped, "and rotten fish." "Worse than that," cried the BFG, roaring with laughter. "To me it is tasting of cockroaches and slime wanglers." This is page 52 now. "We really have to eat it," Sophie said. "You do, unless you was wanting to become so thin you will be disappearing into thick ear." "Into thin air," Sophie said. "A thick ear is something quite different." Once again, that sad, winsome look came onto the BFG's eyes. "Words," he said, "is such a twitch-tickling problem to me in all my life. So you must simply try to be patient and stop squibbling. As I am telling you before, I know exactly what words I am wanting to say, but somehow or another they is always getting squibbled around." "That happens to everyone," Sophie said. "Not like it happens to me," the BFG said. "I speak in the most terrible Wiglish." "I think you speak beautifully," Sophie said. "You do?" cried the BFG, suddenly brightening. "You really do?" "Simply beautifully," Sophie repeated. "Well, that is the nicest present anybody has ever given me in my whole life," cried the BFG. "Are you sure you is not twiddling my leg?" "Of course not," Sophie said. "I just love the way you talk." "How wondercrump!" cried the BFG, still beaming. "How whoopsie splunkers! How absolutely squiffling! I is a lot of stutter." "Listen," Sophie said, "we don't have to eat snozcumbers. In the fields around our village there are all sorts of lovely vegetables like cauliflowers and carrots. Why don't you get some of those next time you go visiting?" The BFG raised his hand and head proudly in the air. "I is a very honorable giant," he said. "I would rather be chewing up rotsome snozcumbers than snitching things from other people." "You stole me," Sophie said. "I did not steal you very much," said the BFG, smiling gently. "After all, you is only a tiny little girl." So the BFG has to eat these filthy snozcumbers because he doesn't like to eat the human beings, but he actually doesn't even want to steal or take away, vegetables from the human beings' gardens. He'd rather just, suffer and eat the snozcumbers than be a mean person, which is pretty crazy. Okay. I'm going to make another video for the next chapter, okay? I'll see you guys for chapter 9.